The Nick Scott Effect. The Nick Scott Effect. Available on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Facebook Watch, and everywhere podcasts are found. Interview requests and show notes available at djnickscott.com.
I'm going to start me a podcast. And I remember I was looking at my friends list, like, what are some friends and people I've known through the years that I would love to have on and talk to? And I was scrolling through and I was like, Sahaj, I got to talk to Sahaj. So, man, I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to talk to me. I really am.
Yeah, of
so
course,
how
man.
have
Awesome.
things been in the band? You guys were just keeping the road hot and on fire. What, late 90s, 2000s? You had From One and Duality and all these albums that just had you out on a crazy touring schedule. And then you kind of stepped away from Raw for a little bit and focused on your production, which you're wildly talented at. But now you're back. Raw is back on the road and making new music. So take me through that journey. How did it start to where you're at now? I find that fascinating.
I mean, I think, sort of a time, it's a timing is everything type story where the beginning of the story is sort of like, floundering for years trying to get a record deal. Then all of a sudden you get a major label record deal and you go right to the biggest record company in the world. And then you learn all the hard facts about how records are made and how much money it costs and how much time and effort goes into marketing and how dependent, especially in the early 2000s, you're talking about, it's still really the internet having a massive influence on who listens to what. So you're still dependent 100% on radio, on your touring markets, on managers and lawyers and all this other stuff. And, it's so dramatically different now that the learning curve, that you can sort of look on the charts and see which guys read the tea leaves the right way and which ones didn't. And for me personally, I've always been like a hopeless romantic. And when I met the girl of my dreams, that became more important than sort of becoming a rock star. And that curtailed sort of my drive to pursue the band full time around 2008. So around 2008 was like pretty much the time I was like, all right, I'm going to basically put this on the side and just focus on writing and producing, even though I'd already started that in 2006. And then, moved to Florida for a little bit, moved to LA for 10 years.
This episode of the podcast is sponsored by The Facial Center. The Facial Center is located in Charleston, West Virginia. They are a full-service medical spa to meet your aesthetic needs. They offer skincare products, facials, injectables, laser treatments, hormone replacements, PDO thread lifts, weight loss, or loss, either one, and facial cosmetic surgeries and tattoo removal. That is what the Facial Center is doing for me. They're helping me remove a mistake that I have on my arm, and it's pretty cool. We're taking pictures and videos of the removal to share with you throughout my process. So if any of those things that you're interested in, the Facial Center, their staff is amazing. They can help you out, and you can check out their whole service menu on their website at thefacialcenter.com.
10 years in LA, and then, basically moving to LA was sort of the trip because your mind says, oh no, now I'm going to be one tiny little fish in this giant ocean of all these people who are producers and writers. But as soon as you get there, you sort of figure out real quick that it's the same 20, 30 people that do everything. It's like there are only a few guys that really get the call every time. And as long as you're sort of in the circle with those guys writing and working, you'll have work. So slowly but surely, it took me about 2 or 3 years to be taken seriously in that capacity. And then I started getting more work and getting better work and then bigger bands. And then it kept on going all the way up to like Motley Crue and Starset and Nothing More and Bad Wolves. Work with a lot of I started out working with everyone that I could, and now I sort of really only work with the bands that I have like a personal connection to, like either musically or emotionally or whether we're friends, something like that. And I think the current universe of music is far more exciting because you're sort of you orchestrate a lot more of what happens, and you have a lot less people to point at when it doesn't work, because you're essentially in charge. Even if you're signed to a label, I have lots of friends who are on big labels and stuff like that, and they still basically are sort of in charge of their destiny, and they can ruin it in one bad song or two.
Sure, yeah. Well, what I always thought was fascinating about your guys' story. So I played in a band with some high school buddies. And we did a Battle of the Bands circa, I think it was like 99, 2000, maybe been 2000. And anyways, at this Battle of the Bands, it was at Bogart's in Cincinnati. I don't know if you know that venue or remember that venue.
Yeah, of course.
And they were handing out these CDs, and these CDs had like singles on them from like 10 different bands. And I wish I still had that CD, man, because it was like a showcase. It was like some new bands, new artists that are out that they were really trying to push to rock radio or on the rock scene. And on that CD was Kryptonite by Three Doors Down, because no one had ever heard of Three Doors Down at that point. And then was Do You Call My Name by a band called Ra. And I was like, and I remember driving in my little beat up hoopty ass Honda to school and to work with $2 in my pocket, just playing Do You Call My Name on repeat and like trying to sing every word with you, which I can't hit the notes you hit, but and I remember being that like 18, 19-year-old kid, just like rocking out as loud as I could in my car to Do You Call My Name. And fast forward 3-4 years, I'm on the air at a radio station called Q102 in Cincinnati. And really good friend of mine, he was my program director at the time, Grover Collins, comes along and he says, "Hey, Ra's playing tonight. Will you go represent the radio station? Are you free tonight?" I was like, "Absolutely. I know those guys. I didn't know you, but I knew your music, And I remember I got to meet you. And I don't know if you hear stories like this often, but I had like a rock star moment with you. I know it's kind of silly, but I did. I was like, "There's Sahaj," and if you remember, you guys were up in a dressing room and I got to hang out with you guys for a little while. And I remember you taking 2 chairs and like trying to pump up before you went on stage. But and then you guys slayed it. And that night I really felt like I gained some friends, and you and Ben and PJ and everybody. And then I got to help you guys again. One of my favorite stories, I hate to be long winded, but one of my favorite raw stories is I was sitting in the on-air studio at Q102 Cincinnati, and we did this charity benefit called the Bosom Ball. And it was obviously for breast cancer. And I think it was Natalie Bedingfield, or Natasha Bedingfield is her name. Yeah. And something had happened with her visa. For whatever reason, she couldn't get into the States, and I forget why. And it's like Wednesday, and the show was on Friday. And I'm in the studio with a good friend of mine, Brian Douglas, who did afternoons at the time, and our program director at the time, Patty Marshall. And Patty is distraught. What are we going to do? It was Natasha Bedingfield, Sarah Evans, and another act. I forget who it is, but Natasha and Sarah were the 2 big acts, and Natasha wasn't coming. And she's like, "What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And now keep in mind, I'm a little like night jock, low man on the totem pole, on air guy, still new. I'm sitting off in the corner, minding my own business while this is going on. And out of the quiet, I don't know why I said this. And I'm so glad it worked, because if it wouldn't have worked, it would have made me look like an idiot. But out of the quiet, I went, "I could get raw." And do you remember, I called you on the phone right then and put you on speakerphone with Patty Marshall, and you guys flew to Cincinnati or drove to Cincinnati like 2-3 days later and played the Bosom Ball, and we hung out at that casino and everything. But that is one of my most fun stories to talk about. My radio career was like, here was this need, and I was like, I can get somebody, and it actually worked. So thank you for making that happen.
So wait, and did Natasha Bedingfield end up showing up?
She did. So it ended up being you guys, Natasha, and Sarah Evans all together.
So would you like to hear the funny part of that story that you probably don't know?
Oh, boy. Am I going to regret this?
No, it's pretty cool. So that was like you said, it was a Friday or a Thursday or something like that.
Yeah.
I actually remember it being maybe a Thursday because it's relevant to the story. But either way, I had gone to a Trapped show. Remember Crazy Chris from Trapped? I went to the Trapped show the day before we played. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And at that show, I literally lost it over this girl. Like I saw this girl walking and I flipped out, like cartoon eyes bug, the tongue comes out, the whole thing. Like I'm losing it over this girl. And I started talking to her. And I walked up to her, and a series of events I get to talk to her. And I'm wearing the 98.9 The Bear shirt, which is a radio station in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is where I live now. This is where I was.
Sure.
Which is where I was before that show. So I was actually doing the morning show in that market that week, covering for somebody who was out. That Wednesday, Trap played, and I went to the show, and I met this girl, and she didn't know Ra from anything, and I was really bummed because I thought that was my only in. I knew I was already way too old for her. She was like 21 years old, and I tell her, oh, I'm in this band Ra, and she's like, I don't know what that is. And I said, oh, and she's like, what songs do you sing? And I said, oh, I sing this song called Fallen Angels, and she was like, oh, my God, I love that song. But then she looked at me and I had the 98.9 Bear shirt on. She's like, well, that's not you. Like, you're not the guy from that band. Like, why do you have a Bear shirt on? And I just sensed very quickly that I had to do something immediately. So I took her to the back of Pierre's, which is the club here. And I sang Fallen Angels to her right there on the spot. To prove my identity.
That's a baller move right there.
Baller move. Well, she's literally like my dream girl. And by the way, at this time, I'm seeing her. She's 21. She's in party mode. I'm just like, this is, I'm going after her because I'm thinking, it's my midlife crisis. I couldn't afford a Corvette, so I'm trying to get the hottest girl I've ever met. And
right.
Anyway, so that happens. And then the next day, and this is why I think that thing that we did was on a Thursday and not a Friday, but I could be wrong. But the next day, I had to drive 4 hours to go do that thing, to do the Natasha Bedingfield in Cincinnati. And I remember I think we were at a place called Jillian's, if I remember properly.
Jillian's, that's exactly right. Man, you got a good memory.
Well, this is etched into my brain. So we play that show to a bunch of 15. You guys were Hot AC stations, so we're playing that show to a bunch of 15-year-old girls who liked our cover of the Police song, right?
Yep.
And
absolutely.
I'm looking at their faces, and they're all just like, "Who is this almost 40-year-old scary guy?" Like what? Like they couldn't make ends of anything we were doing until we sang that song, and then they were like really happy. So anyway,
that song did very well. Every little thing she does is magic. Your guys' cover of that. I still, when I shuffle Spotify or I'm listening to satellite radio, it still comes on.
Yeah. I mean, it did amazing in your marketplace. Here's a funny thing. So Universal, that phone call was fun because Doug Morris ran Universal Music Group at the time. So they had a big meeting about that song. And Avery Littman, who's the president of Universal Republic now, who has like Post Malone and Ariana Grande and The Weeknd and all the biggest acts in the world, he told me at the time, he was like, yeah, it's really great. Doug was bringing up the song. We thought it was really positioned well. And then he brought up the data. And the data suggested that we were selling more Police singles than we were selling of our own single. So people actually thought that was a rock cover by Sting and not a band. Anyway,
I see.
Yeah, so it didn't really translate to sales, which was why it never got spread to other stations. But anyway,
but it was huge on air.
Wow. Back to our night at Julian's. So we go and we play the acoustic show. We do the thing, blah, blah, blah. And then PJ comes up to me after Natasha Bedingfield. We met her and hung out with her for a little bit, blah, blah, blah. PJ comes up to me after that set and he says, hey, Natasha Bedingfield wants to get a drink with you. And I was like, oh, she wants to go and get drinks like with the band or whatever. No. He looked at me and he was like, no, she wants to get a drink with you. And I was like, oh. And here's the funny part. Here's the funny part. I didn't know who she was because she hadn't like blown up, but she was bigger. But I was just like, I just thought about it for like maybe 10 seconds. I was like, no, because I got to drive back 4 hours to Fort Wayne to meet this girl that I met last night.
Oh.
So I literally bailed. I bailed on Tasha Bedingfield, drove 4 hours just to meet Kira, who's now my wife, by the way.
It's your wife now.
Yeah. Drove 4 hours to meet Kira in the parking lot, and we hung out for a little bit and had a really nice night. And then basically for the next 4 months while I was still living in New Jersey, I talked to her every night for like 4 hours and just became addicted. And then, basically we got to a point where in 2006, I was still touring and I was sort of deciding what I was going to do. And she sort of gave me an ultimatum and was like, I don't want to be in a relationship with a guy that's on tour. And I had to weigh it. And I was like, dream girl, rock band, dream girl, rock band. And I chose the dream girl. So I stayed home and, we've been this October was 17 years we've been together.
Yeah.
So
wow, dude, congratulations.
And she's still the hottest chick I've ever known. And now we have a son. And he's way hotter. He's way hotter than I'll ever be. So
she's not in the room with you right now, is she?
Who, my wife?
Yeah.
No, she doesn't know. She'd be kicking me in the face if she heard anything I just said.
So I'm sorry. Can I go on a limb here and say I didn't realize little old Nick Scott was that a part of your story? That's incredible with meeting your wife and that night and that one Patty Marshall. Not knowing how to cover that band, and I just out of nowhere went, I can get raw, and how that would be etched in your memory like that. That's incredible.
I mean, I could right now I could be Mr. Bedingfield. That could have been what happened that night, but it didn't go that way. And then the butt rock universe, and I call it butt rock because that's what it is. And then the butt rock universe, shortly after we sort of, came into the scene, the butt rock universe sort of died out real quick. So it was like you had your Hinders and your 10 years for like 2005, 2006, and then everything just went terrible. And all of, we lost a third of the panel. We lost all kinds of touring markets. Everything went really bad for the market. And it stayed that way roughly, in my opinion. It stayed pretty crappy until like 2012, 13, 14, when things started shifting a little bit more towards touring was getting better, bands were getting bigger. Five Finger was like being something that paid, made a lot of money, and then Bring Me the Horizon in 2014 changed the landscape, and it just all became sort of a different game. And technology became cheaper, and it became a lot easier to make records, which was a lot of the way things changed for everyone, But yeah, and then the world changed a lot too. So, because when we got signed, it was just post 9/11, which was very strange, and it was a very weird time. No one knew what to do about anything, and then it just everything changed incrementally, and we had the recession that hit in 08. Really, I think, affected the record companies, and there's just a lot of reasons for me to sort of shift my lane at that point.
Absolutely, and I don't blame you. And I think some of your most notable songs from the band Roz, You Call My Name, Rectifier, Fallen Angels. I love Fallen Angels. So as a music nerd myself, I love the orchestral placement of songs and songwriting and riff writing. Where do you draw inspiration? Do you write lyrics down first? Do you come up with a riff and then put lyrics to it? How do you write?
It's changed a lot since the beginning. So when you're in a band, I think a lot of bands write the music first. A lot of people in bands, a guitar player is really just going to focus on writing riffs, and a singer is really just going to focus on writing to whatever chords somebody gives him to write to, or writing to his own chords. That changed a lot when I started becoming a producer, because melody writing becomes the primary delivery system for a band's brand or an artist's brand, right? So if you think
Yeah,
about
sure.
someone like Post Malone or all of those great, Billie Eilish, all of them, Charlie Puth, all the great pop artists, their melody choices are as distinct as their voice. And a lot of that is what drives their brand. And and here's a major shift from the old days to now. Now we use the word brand. We never used to use the
Yeah.
word brand. In the old days, you had
Nope.
your band and you had your songs. Now you have to have a brand and you have to use your songs to deliver your brand. And you have to have some sort of tangible mission statement that you adhere to in order to sort of successfully market yourself. And the interesting thing in terms of the writing process for me is that it has become far more about taking the simplest concepts and somehow figuring out a way to make it feel fresh and new. Whereas in the old days, it was more about how can I reinvent the wheel? How can I come up with a riff that nobody's ever played? How can I come up with a thing? And it's hard, when you're my age, you hear things and you're like, well, there are no riffs that nobody's played. And there are no melodies that nobody has sang. It's how do you dress it? It's more about, I use when I teach, when I work with bands and I do my first day lecture, it's always about all of these poetic analogies. One of the poetic analogies I use, which is a little misogynistic, but I say, the song is equivalent to a beautiful girl. You have this beautiful girl, this beautiful work of art of this person, but she has no clothes. So how are you going to dress her? Do you want her in leather? Do you want her in a sundress? Do you want her? How are you going to make what is the conditions in which you're going to create this music around? Because that's the only thing you have control over. In the old days, you think, the illusion in the old days was that you had control over, okay, these are the notes, these are the chords. Well, not really. Because now with 20, 30,000 songs being released a day, it's all been there. It's all been written in some shape or form. I used to joke around and say Paul McCartney wrote all the pretty melodies there ever will be for a pop song. There's no version.
I could see that.
And you have to think about the music now as a delivery system. So that's why it's cool when I work with a band like Starset, which wears like fucking spacesuits, or Motley Crue, where there's a brand, and Nothing More, where there's a brand, and Bad Wolves, which has sort of like I'm Five Finger meets Nickelback, but at least that's a brand. You know what I mean? And there's a way of sort of coloring that, which is ultimately why, half of the work I do is in the pop universe, like just top 40. And for me, that's more exciting because I feel like sonically, the bar is higher in top 40 or mainstream music than it is in rock music. Whereas like a lot of radio rock, you can sort of interchange the singers, interchange the bands, interchange everybody's kicks and snares sound the same. Everybody's guitars sound the same. All the vocal lines are sort of structured the same way. All the intros are the same, and it can be frustrating if you're trying to find something deeper to say. But now with my focus primarily on melody shapes and trying to deliver moments and have singing be at a certain level, I can sustain myself in rock because I feel like that area is still sort of, and it's a sad reason why it's a little underexploited. And one of the it's not a sad reason, but it's the truth. The truth is, if you're a great singer today, do you want to be Post Malone in The Weeknd, or do you want to be the guy from Theory of a Dead Man? Like and Tyler's an awesome guy, but if I had my choice, I'd rather be Post Malone, So when you're a kid growing up, if you show massive talent, you're probably not going to start a metal band or a hard rock radio band. You're probably going to start something that's going to be a little bit more adventurous, but yeah.
Well, I've always been fascinated by your talent and your work ethic because as I've followed you and watched you over the years, we've known each other, here's a guy, that I was a fan of just on your talent as a singer. I mean, don't sell yourself short, buddy. And I'm not trying to stroke your ego. You've got pipes on you like I think are second to none. And I think you are one of the most talented rock singers that I know. And then, of course, the whole band Raw, your guys' music, to me, I love it. I mean, I could put on Raw on Spotify and jam out all day and have a blast. With that, your music production and your knowledge and what you teach these other bands. So to me, that's incredible. It's like a diamond in the rough type situation where you have someone who's not only talented as an artist, but talented as a coach and as a producer. You mentioned top 40. What are some top 40 acts you've worked with that listeners may be familiar with?
Probably. I mean, I really am, the top 40 universe. I'm connected to a lot of guys that work very high up on the ladder. So a friend
Sure.
of mine works with Charlie Puth and Maroon 5 and Lil Dicky and Jason Derulo and Meghan Trainor and like, so I'm sort of a step away from those guys who are really, really high up on the level. But to be honest, until I moved out of LA, I didn't have time to develop sort of a catalog of top 40 until COVID hit. And now I'm in the process of sort of building this really big catalog of top 40 artists that I discovered, girls and guys that I think are really, really good, and sort of spending my time creating this stuff so that when the time is right, I can present it to my friends who are much higher up on that ladder. What I used to do in LA, which of course you want to do it because the pop world is so much bigger than the rock world, is I would play my friends a song and they'd be like, man, that's dope. And then that'd be it, because I'd have one song to play them, and it's like, I realized that I really do need to have like a body of work to show in this genre. So right now I have probably 12 to 13 pop songs that are in my universe, they're competitive. And I think, what I'm trying to do ultimately is make a move eventually within, I would say 23 is sort of the year I'm aiming at, to where I sort of present it not only to publishing companies, but also to Film and Television Sync, and also to my friends who are higher up on the ladder. And to see whether or not anybody, is like, oh, this is now valid. You are validated in this. And now I think I need to put you to work with other artists and possibly bigger artists. But the big problem with that, of course, again, is for every second I'm working, developing and writing pop music, I'm really not making any money, because it's a developmental thing. It's a sort of a work in progress, a proof of concept type mentality. So I have to still do my butt rock stuff to pay the bills and also balance it around,
Butt rock stuff.
True. I'm sure you've heard the term butt rock.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah,
where do you think it comes from? This is always interesting because everybody has a different origin of where it comes from.
I've heard the term. I turned 18 in the year 2000. So, my high school years, I was a big fan of Korn, Limp Bizkit. Slipknot really came on the scene about my junior year of high school. So I was big fans of them. Creed, I loved Creed. And then as the century turned, I became one of the biggest Sevendust fans you'll ever find. And I actually developed friendships with Lejean and Clint. And then you, of course, Ra and Sahaj, fans of you guys. And I'm just thinking of the bands that I really held my interest and I followed through all of that time. It was Sevendust and Ra, System of a Down, things like that. And then I'd say about 2008, 2010, what was on the rock scene at that time, I liked Avenged Sevenfold, don't get me wrong. I think maybe they were a little bit later, but they were right in there. But there weren't a lot of bands that really kind of captivated me. And I don't know if that's showing my age, and then I heard the term butt rock here probably in the last couple of years. So I'm assuming it's somewhere in that era that I just described.
So technically the butt rock era is the early 2000s, basically when my band broke, right? So there's the internet version of where it comes from, the term. The internet version of the term is because of all the active rock stations that used to say, this is blah, 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 nothing but rock. Like that was their call thing, nothing but rock, so butt rock, right? So that became the joke. And I was always like, that's definitely not the actual origin. And there's part of me that's actually delusional enough to think that I had a part in inventing this, because in the late 90s, I kept on using the term butt rock. And the reason I talked about it is because in the 80s, we had the hair metal dudes, right? The hair metal dudes were also known as cock rock. So the hair metal dudes were known as cock rock. And then what happened immediately after cock rock was grunge. What happened immediately after grunge was sort of new metal, right? Korn, Limp Bizkit, Stained, blah, 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 blah. But the calling card of those bands, and this leads to Creed in the late 90s, was detuning the guitars lower. So they were in drop C. They were in drop C. Drop C, and Korn was in A and B. So
yeah, they were on 7 strings.
And as was Wes Borland every once in a while. So everything was dropped down lower. So I used to use the term butt rock because what's lower than your cock? Your butt. So it was lower, and that's why it was butt rock, because it came out of your butt. It wasn't like, your cock is like it's like in front and pointing upward, whereas like your butt is just like your butt's low and dragging, and people's pants are always low. So it's like butt rock, and that was it. And the lineage is clear that Korn and all of those bands were new metal, but new metal spawned Creed, which was the beginning of butt rock, and then Creed, of course, spawned Nickelback, and of course, within the Creed years, you also had Godsmack, the kings, technically the late 90s to early 2000 kings of butt rock, in which case then Nickelback sort of came in the early 2004 era, 3 and 4, and started becoming the dominant force at rock radio. And all of that is detuned. It's all tuned down lower, and it's just shitty. It's shitty pop songs with detuned guitars, which a lot of bands were doing, right?
A lot of bands.
And ultimately, that survived a pretty long time. I mean, the definition of butt rock still applies to bands like Five Finger, and I work with Jason Hook, who recently left Five Finger. But to me, Five Finger was sort of like, there's always the quintessential butt rock band. In the format, most people don't realize this, but the format is called active rock, and that format at radio was created for one band and one band only, and it was Metallica. Because what had happened was Metallica was getting mainstream alternative and even top 40 play at the time with Enter Sandman.
Yeah.
And they couldn't play anything off, and maybe Nothing Else Matters. And they couldn't get any of the radio stations to play any of the other songs off of the album, which was by far the biggest album of the time. And they basically created a format at radio just for Metallica. So Metallica lasted, I have this theory that every 7 years, the blue-collar hard rock metal band gets replaced. So Metallica's roughly 92 to 97, 98, somewhere in that range, 91, that's radio. Yeah. And then in that 96, 97, 98 period, Godsmack comes in and dominates for their period. They come out with their second album, which has a Wake on it. And then I Stand Alone, which technically is the most successful hard rock song in the history of active rock radio, stayed number one longer than any other song in the history of rock, probably because it was the soundtrack to the Scorpion King. But and as that band sort of, sunsetted into 2006, 7, and 8, that's when Five Finger comes up and becomes sort of that band, right? So, and Five Finger's held on now, as far as I'm concerned, the longest, because they're sort of still relevant, although I would argue that the sun is setting on them too, but it's more of like a 10-year, I guess, what are we looking at? 2008, 18, that would be 10, 12, 14 years is a good run, I would say. So
I think they're actually here tonight or last night or tomorrow night with Brantley.
Yeah, they just played here in Fort Wayne, and I did not go.
Yeah. So who do you think is going to be the band that replaces Five Finger?
There won't be, and bear with me, because the fact of the matter now is that the shelf life of all music is so short that you don't have the ability to build a project off of a song. Like Enter Sandman was in our psyche for probably a year. You know, like that song just held around forever. Nowadays, because of the way Spotify works and algorithms work and the internet work, you get massive dissemination of a track instantaneously, right? So instead of a song breaking in Boston and then sprinkling around the world over a period of a year, it all goes out instantaneous and everybody listens to it. The nature of production in rock songs is so generically similar that you can have a great, you know, I hate naming names, but I'm just going to do it because it's just what I do. You can have a great I Prevail song and a great Falling in Reverse song and a great Chris Motionless and White song and a great Bad Omen song and a great, but they're all essentially sharing the same lane because it's all the same music with different singers, but even the singers are somewhat interchangeable. And there's just an element of a homogenization that I think reflects the cycle. So you have that cycle, right? So we're talking about, we had a creative cycle of bands like Pearl Jam and all of the Seattle grunge and then Soundgarden, and then that sort of got us into things where we're like, okay, we're cool with the songs that have like lots of vibe but no shape. Now we'd like some songs with shape. So we got the Nickelbacks and the Creeds, which were giving us pop songs, but then we got tired of that. And then the market shrank, and then now we were bands with like Volbeat and System of a Down and all of the stuff that was a little bit more quirky and interesting, but it was sort of, you know, I would say Volbeat wasn't really like pushing the bar quite far enough to sustain the format, although they were very successful. And then Five Finger comes in and sort of takes the elements of Metallica and elements of Nickelback and the elements of this and that and shoved it onto one and marketed it really well. But ultimately, the audience had sort of aged, right? Because active rock was aging and the demographic was now, instead of being 35, it was like 55 by the time you get to 2010, 2012, 2013. And again, by 2014, I sort of give a lot of credit to Bring Me the Horizon for sort of changing the landscape with Sempiternal, Can You Feel My Heart, those kinds of songs, and then after that, Throne and all of the stuff off of their follow-up albums, and they sort of blew up bigger. They do bigger numbers than any of the bands that I mentioned before, basically because they're very, very, very they're creative in a way that sort of created a lane. And now, unfortunately, there's a bunch of people behind them in that lane, but the lane is their lane. But yeah, I think music-wise, what has happened just in general with rock, hard rock, is we're in that part of the cycle now where things are just sort of like fighting for an audience, and people are now out of COVID and everybody's trying to tour and everybody's trying to make money and trying to do, but you know, the production and the approach to these songs is starting to sound extremely similar. And I think it's the equivalent of that period in the late 90s when we had NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, and Max Martin was doing all of them, and it all sounded the same, and it all had the same sort of production style. And then out of that, the person, and again, not to be topical, but the person who broke that cycle, or at least was instrumental, in my opinion, in breaking that cycle, was Kanye. Once Kanye started producing songs for the radio that had his stamp on it, it broke the mold in the early 2000s, as did Black Eyed Peas and certain acts like that. But I think Kanye really should get most of the credit, in my opinion, because he just sort of, he wouldn't have Kendrick, you wouldn't have The Weeknd, you wouldn't have Post Malone, you wouldn't have you wouldn't even have Billie Eilish if it wasn't for Kanye, in a lot of my opinion, But I think it's all about those cycles, The pop cycle for me is now, ever since the early 2000s, mid 2000s, pop to me is adventurous and tries to try weird stuff and is sort of fearless, where rock bands seem to be sort of buried under fear-based decisions that are, if I do this too much, then I'm off the grid. And if I don't do this at all, if I'm on the grid too much, then I don't have shelf life, because every idea I have just sort of disappears quickly. And even for the bands that I work with that are sort of super creative, they have to be careful, because then they start parroting themselves. Because you get a band that's got, okay, well, here's our directive. We do this one thing. And then all of a sudden, 3 albums, 4 albums later, they're still doing that thing. And they think it's branding. But the other side of the world is sort of like, we've seen that already. What else you got? But super duper proud of, that record. But you have to understand, like, as a guy who's sort of in the industry now, I already knew the stigma of a guy my age putting out a record, blah, 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 and all the other things. And the band doesn't tour, and we don't have 1 million people on Instagram, and we don't, like, all of those things are just facts that I didn't really ultimately give a shit about. I was just really, I was in a position where I was singing so much on other people's stuff and just realizing that it wasn't, and I mean this, I'm trying to be humble saying this, but it wasn't that I was singing as well as I did when I was in the band. I was singing way better and way more controlled and way more. The vocals on Intercorrupted, to me, smoke all the vocals on any record I've ever done. And on top of which, I have to say that the amount of editing and trickery to create those vocals was less than the other albums. So basic editing sort of put this album in the condition it's in, whereas in the old days, I had to spend time sort of fixing a lot and making sure. It's not like I had bad control or a bad voice, but just over time, my singing has become ultra efficient. So I use very little air to create the sound, in which case it just gives me a lot more control. Yeah, I mean, it was 7 years. The last record I had put out was in 2012. 13 was Critical Mass, and then the single came out in 2020, album came out in 21, and the production value, so things like sound design, which is the synthy stuff and the layering and all that stuff, far more intricate and difficult and complicated in Intercorrupted, because the trick with it, I had done it with other bands, but the trick with it for that record was to make sure it didn't ruin the 2 guitars, bass, and drums version of the band. So essentially every song can be listened from simply a 2 guitars, bass, and drums and a vocalist mentality, but there's so much like synthy layering going on that's subtle and sort of non-obtrusive, but it's there to make things feel more modern. And so it didn't sound like a 2002 record. I wanted it to sound as modern as possible, but I also felt like from a vocal standpoint, what you're saying, it's the writing, because I'd written so many songs, the writing was way more sort of honest to me and a little bit more easier for me to feel confident in what I was doing singing wise, because the writing was there for me. So I felt very, very good, and there's a part of me that wishes I had done what Ben Burnley had done, which was, really, really focus and stick it out and do the thing and build the band and go and build it and build it and build it and build it. I honestly believe that if I had spent 80% of my energy that I spent doing other people's music on just Raw, it's very likely that we would be bigger than we are, and maybe even a Breaking Benjamin or a Theory of a Dead Man. I mean, we used, those bands, all those bands, Shinedown, all of them, they all used to open for us. So it's not, they were in situations where we would, we were the hot act of the day, and there were times where they were open for us. And I have all those posters, which are really funny. But yeah, I think I don't have regret because, the market was always a tough market, and it's not like, in my brain, I just don't think I believed that was going to take care of me financially in the long term. And I just didn't want to play, it would have been different, I think, if I had been signed to Universal at 22 and not 32. I probably would have had a different mentality.
Well, I think there's something to be said in the same, I feel the same in my terrestrial radio career. There's something to be said for family. And family is important. And, you got married, you had a son, she wanted you at home, not on the road. Family's important. Family is very, very important. So I think at the end of the day, there's no one out here in the fandom, in the fan world of you, that is going to fault you for going down the path of having a family, because that's what's important. But I still love hearing your work.
And I think for me now, the way that the industry has evolved, I can put out music all the time. it doesn't cost me anything to make it.
Yeah.
And I can raise the level of production is now high. And I can constantly release music. Again, which is, by the way, on the horizon. I have sort of a game plan for something that's fairly dramatic, and it's a shift, but it's designed to reflect sort of where I am artistically and what I like. And I haven't really.
Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Ultimately, I'm Puerto Rican from New York City, right? And dance music has always sort of been part of what I've incorporated into everything that I've done in some subtle, maybe in a cryptic way, or maybe in a specific way. But I really like certain kinds of dance music. And I had this idea a couple of years ago to do this one track that's very sort of cinematic and has this thing, and then it followed a certain format that was sort of EDM-ish, but it still has a big giant guitar chorus, and it's still really cool vocals, and it's really me, but it's this whole thing, and it's not unreminiscent of what I've done with Starset, but it's my own version of it. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of songs came out with that exact format. And it just reinforced my gut feeling about this. And because it's sort of a niche, I want to, at least if not do an entire album of it, I want the next few singles to just be sort of a complete different shift. Because this last record with Scooter and Ben and PJ and me, like that's not happening ever again. There's never going to be a record with everyone in it. Scooter's really not, essentially, Scooter's in a place where he has lots of money and he's comfortable and doesn't need. He did that record as his respect for the band, but not necessarily. He's not going to continue to do that. And again, we've done records without Scooter. We did, we did Black Sun with Andy, but But yeah, I mean, with Ben having his own thing and PJ's in 14 bands, and it's just one of those things where, like, I just feel like, you know what, I don't have a big enough audience to feel this massive responsibility to stay in my lane. So what I'm going to do is going to be somewhat experimental and far more sort of, I would say, young in quotations, but it's sort of designed to be ageless but modern. And I really want to, take this risk, and whoever comes with me comes with me.
Well, let me tell you this. I'll afford this to you. So once a month, I produce and DJ a track that goes on Sirius XM, Pitbull's Globalization. I do a few for BPM. There's a few national syndicated radio stations I do some DJing for, top 40, hip hop, so forth. So if you come out with a really cool dance track that you're putting out there, I want you to send it to me, and I'll DJ it in the mix. We'll put it in the mix, and we'll put it out there on radio for you, man.
Absolutely. And it's, I will give you a clue as to maybe a little bit of the tonality, but there's a song by Millennium called Shivering that he did with the Spirit Box singer.
Yeah.
And
I know the song.
It's not quite that, but there are elements that are doing this in that song, what I'm ultimately going to be doing. My thing also, by the way, is I listen to music like a 15-year-old girl. And so one of the things that sort of stuck to me in the last 2 or 3 years, sadly he's gone, but I really became obsessed with Juice WRLD for a while. And Juice WRLD, there's just stuff that stuck to me that is slightly injected into what this idea is. So,
I mean, just so talented. And, I'm one of these guys that, if you want to smoke weed or whatever, it should be legal. And his death was him swallowing drugs because the cops were coming on his airplane. He was scared to death. It was so not needed. And the music industry lost such a amazing talent. So to hear you drawing inspiration from him and even doing any tracks similar to him, man, is amazing.
Yeah, and I have some demos in there. If once they get more fleshed out, I'll send you so you can check them out.
Dude, I cannot wait. You mentioned Ben, you mentioned PJ, yeah, you mentioned I never got to meet Scooter All the times I got to hang out with you is
Right.
with Andy. How are those guys? How are they doing?
PJ's great. He was here. I mean, I see him regularly. We played 4 shows a month and a half ago. PJ was on them. I mean, you know, those guys, like I announced that we're doing this 20th anniversary from one tour that starts in like 2 weeks, right? But I'm doing it just me and some fill-in guys. And, you know, yes, would it be awesome if we could get all of those dudes to do it? Yeah, but we went out, all of us, the original band, went out and toured during 21, and nobody really showed up, you know? So it was, yeah,
Really?
I mean, it was during COVID, so maybe people just weren't going. But, you know, we tried really hard. I spent a lot of money on ads and tried to like drive numbers and stuff like that. And it just really didn't, you know, it wasn't inspiring for them. It wasn't bad. We had good markets here and there, but it was underwhelming. And now that I'm doing these things where I'm getting a little bit more traction online, all I do is get hit up by people saying, "Oh, I wish you would play this place." And I'm like, "Oh, that's where we just played last year. Where were you?" And it turns out that the algorithms were basically just keeping us hidden. No one was seeing any of our content, even though we were paying money. Now I'm not paying for ads, not paying for anything, but I think Facebook and Instagram have finally gone crazy and freaked out about TikTok, that they're letting you get more reach now, organic reach, because all of a sudden my posts are getting 1,000 likes and 1,000, you know, and 500 comments. And I used to have to boost an ad to get half as many as that. Now it's just happening organically, and I'm like, oh, this is them freaking out and realizing that people are just going to shift formats if we can't reach our audience. Because, you know, TikTok is incredibly addictive and very effective, and I think far more entertaining and makes you feel better. You know, I have this.
It does.
I have this theory about Facebook. Well, I don't have a theory. I feel like it's the quantum shift that TikTok offers, which is, you know, in Facebook and Instagram, you're really limited to whoever follows you. Those are the only people who are going to see your content. Whereas in TikTok, you could have no followers, but create a really compelling piece of content and overnight have 100,000 new followers, because the algorithm decides what you see, not your followers do. And it's interesting to me, you know, as a guy who I've been grinding in the music business for a long time, on my Instagram feed is a bunch of guys doing better than me, whether it's The Rock or other bands or other producers or because those are the people I follow, right? Because it's my business. But that doesn't make me feel good to see all these dudes crushing it. Whereas on TikTok, it's literally just the things I'm interested in. It's like Marvel stuff and quantum mechanics and hot girls in bikinis and, you know, just like the simplest stuff in the world that I just like, oh, this is the stuff I really care about, you know? And
so the episode right before you came from TikTok. So I was scrolling TikTok last Thursday night. I was sicker and crap. My son, he's 4. How old's your son now?
7.
7. My daughter's 9. So we got a couple close there. Anyways, you know what it's like having daycare and school. They bring everything home that they catch, right? So my son brought a virus home. I had it. I'm sitting there. I'm scrolling TikTok. Now my TikTok is mainly of guitar riffs, because I play guitar, and comedy skits. But I found this guy who popped up who, now I'm a Christian, but he was an evangelist who's now an ex-Christian. He deconverted. And his TikTok was basically telling his story of deconversion. And I share this with you because I reached out to him and he agreed. So the episode before us is with a guy named Justin Best. And it's weird how TikTok, like you said, that the algorithm put certain things in front of you. And because of that algorithm, I met this guy, had a wonderful episode, and our episode now has thousands of downloads and views, talking about theology with one another. And I mentioned that because it seems like TikTok has really taken the Facebook, the Twitter, 2010, 2015 era Instagram, and it's now shifted. Remember, it was MySpace?
Oh, yeah.
And it went from MySpace to Facebook. Sure. And now it's gone Facebook and Twitter. Now it's the TikTok, and that seems to be where everything is going. Speaking of TikTok, I watched a TikTok of yours, and I'm intrigued to hear this story. And you can share as much as you feel comfortable. You can leave out what you don't feel comfortable. But you shared a TikTok that got for what I saw, a lot of views and a lot of feedback where you tried to buy your master recordings. How did that play out?
I mean, it's the 20th anniversary of From One, which is my first record, my most successful record. Do You Call My Name still streams 500,000 times a month, and 500,000 may not show up as a lot, but just think about it. You got 12, so it's 6 million a year. This song is streaming basically. And 1 million streams is $4,500, even on the low end, and major labels make more than that. But it's been 20 years. We sold 200,000 of the first album. And let's say on the low end, they did $5 a record, right? Like the low end, they cleared $5 a record for the album that they sold in 2002. So let's say we have 200,000. That's $1 million, right? So there's $1 million right there. And then there's all the streaming, there's all the sync placements for some of the video games and some of the things. Then there's an additional 100,000 of the second record, which Duality sold 100,000 copies roughly. So that's another 500,000. So now we're at $1.5 million just in sales. And we haven't even gotten to syncs and streaming for the entire, duration. Now, mind you, Do You Call My Name streaming numbers, ultimately at the end of the day, that first album probably has 40 to 50 million streams. All right. So 10 million streams that's low. It's fairly low, by the way. That's a low number. There are songs that,
really?
Yeah, that's very low. I mean, I had this argument. So a good friend of mine is this attorney named Eric German. And at one point he represents Five Finger, and at one point he posted this post that was so, he sometimes he's super duper enthusiastic, really great dude, and he loves all of his clients. And he's super pumped. He gets pumped up by everything. So, he has Five Finger as a client. He's like, Five Finger is the most streamed band in 2019 and 770 million streams in 1 year, and blah, 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 and he's going off about that. And just because I'm a dick and I can't help it, I sent him a text message just direct to him, and I said, my buddy Andrew Goldstein co-wrote that song Hot Girl Bummer with Black Bear. And that song at that time was about 6 months old, and it was one song, and it had 700 and something million streams on it. So that one song in about 5 or 6 months had as many streams as the entire catalog of Five Finger with F8 being released on top of that. And it came back. So there's a hierarchy, right? So when you think about having 1 billion streams, 1 billion streams on the low end generates $4.5 million for that one song. You have to remember, in the old days, when you and I talk about the old school record deals and the old school things, there are some of the biggest records in history that cost maybe $1 million or $2 million to make. Right, I'm talking about big records, Thriller-size records, like
Metallica Black.
I don't think the Black Album cost more than $1 million. I would be very surprised if it cost more than $1 million to make, and not include. I'm not talking about their advance. I'm talking about the actual cost to make that record. Like even with their advance, maybe 1.5. I actually need to look that up because I feel like that's a relevant number to find out what was their advance and how much was the actual album cost. But let's just say 1 billion streams on a single song, which Post Malone has, Ed Sheeran has, The Weeknd has. Let's not even get into Drake and Travis Scott. 1 billion streams is $4.5 million, and that's just from Spotify. That doesn't include YouTube, Pandora, Apple Music, any other streaming, Tidal, all of that stuff, Amazon. It doesn't include any of that. That's just 1 billion streams on one format. Wow. So people who complain about the music industry are really talking from a point of ignorance, right? Because you have to remember, in the old day, you could sell 10 million records. Right? That was diamond. Like NSYNC in 2000 going diamond meant they sold over 10 million. Linkin Park Hybrid Theory, 12 million, in the first 2 years or whatever. Those numbers get prorated against how many songs are on the album And then also, you got to remember, no artist was getting 100% of anything. So the record companies were taking 80% and giving the artists 20% of, let's say, on an album that first of all, they had to recoup all their money back. And then they started making roughly $2 a record, something like that. If they're making a $10 record and they got a $20% deal. So $2 a record towards 10 million. So how much is that? 10 million times 2 is 20 million bucks, right?
20 million.
Right. Yeah. So 20 million bucks. I'm talking about one song generating 25% of that from one track.
One track.
And remember, here's the difference. You don't have to create a CD or anything. You have both require making a video, both require marketing, both require all that stuff. But there's no physical CD, so there's an extra $1 or $1.50 you're adding to the pie, because out of that other money, $1.50 went towards making the CD and shipping and getting it into fucking Best Buy. You know, streaming is not bad. People just think of it the wrong way.
I had a gentleman on. He was actually part of my schooling at the Ohio Center for Broadcasting. Now he's a songwriter in Nashville. And he was basically telling me the opposite of what you just explained, of how streaming doesn't pay. He has songwriters in Nashville. Now, there may be a difference in being an artist and being a songwriter, but
no,
his perspective
I'll clarify this very simply for you.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
The issue at hand, and I run into this all the time. Guys who don't have successful artists don't make any money from streaming.
That's fair.
I have a friend who is a co-writer on Sugar by Maroon 5.
Oh, yeah.
Which has 1 billion streams on Spotify, 1 billion streams on YouTube. This guy was getting almost $200,000 a quarter.
Oh my gosh.
Just from ASCAP.
Wow.
So the problem isn't they're not paying. The problem is, first question is always, who owns the master? Because whoever owns the master is the one getting most of the money. In a modern universe, everybody remembers Macklemore?
Oh, yeah.
Remember Macklemore? So Macklemore's genius was that he owned all those masters. He only did what's called a P&D deal, which is promotion and distribution deal. So he kept 80%, and Sony, I believe, or one of those, Sony BMG or something, was his distribution network. So he made bank. Big, giant, huge, enormous bank on those records. And he was one of the first people to make that normal. Now, bands that you and I just talked about, Korn's not on a label anymore. Korn owns their own masters. Well, why would they be, right? If you can get off of a record company and create your own label in which all you have to do is fund the distribution and marketing and all that other stuff yourself, if you've got Korn money, then why wouldn't you own it?
That's a new phrase we should use in our daily vocabulary. I got that Korn money.
Yeah, Korn money. You know, the other, and I did, my third album was Black Sun. Black Sun.
Fantastic record, by the way.
Thank you. But Black Sun, Avery Lippman at Universal was nice enough to give me my own label imprint at Fontana, which Universal owned, and I distributed that as the label. I was the label. I made 80%.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Sold 27,000 records, but I pocketed about $6 an album. So think about that number.
So 27,000 times 6?
27,000 times 6.
Hold on.
Which is about 180 grand, something like that.
I'll figure that out for you right now, Mr. Sahaj Ticotin. So 27,000 times 6, $162,000.
Right,
there.
and that's not publishing money. Woo! That's literally just retail money coming in, and that's after I paid off everything. So
that was gonna be my next question.
Which is more than I made off of Duality or From One.
Oh wow!
And I had $850,000 as my budget.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's the way it works.
Even in that number, that $162,000, you're not paying promotion or distribution or making or anything like that?
So
That's just
the 162 includes the distribution fees, the end cap fees, meaning getting it on like Best Buy and FYE or whatever at the time. It includes everything that happens distribution wise. It doesn't. Out of that, I spent $18,000 on radio because we went to radio with Broken Hearted Soul, and so we spent $18,000 or maybe a little bit more than that on radio. I paid the band. And I also had to fund, different aspects of like making posters and things like that. But let's just take all of that off and call it $120,000. It's still $120,000 from one project that basically took me a year to do. But it would have been, it's one project while I was working on 5 or 6 others. So when people complain about streaming, they're always complaining about the way mechanical licenses are paid out and the way publishing money doesn't generate much for a songwriter on that edge. But the songwriters nowadays, everybody who knows what they're doing and has like a vibe or a track record, they all get a piece. They'll get points of a song.
Well, what Dave had told me, Dave Linehan, he's a songwriter and he's in a big songwriting community in Nashville. He told me that he has buddies that'll say, "Oh, I got 1 million streams on this song I wrote on Spotify. I got a check for $42.
Yeah, but that's 1 million streams. 1 million streams is not a lot.
No.
1 million streams is not a lot. Look at it this way. If you were to take the publishing royalties, right? Remember, from a stream, the publishing royalties are not the same as if it gets played on the radio station. That's an ASCAP. That's a performance royalty. You're talking about a mechanical license royalty. So the mechanical license equivalent is 1,500 streams equals one album sale.
Oh, I did not know that.
So that's RIAA. The RIAA determined recently that 1,500 streams equals the equivalent of one album sale. So let's say you have a song that has 1 million streams, right? Let's just make it 1.5 million because it goes into 1,500 easier. Sure. That's 1,000. Now, an album would generally pay you 65 cents to 65 cents roughly, or 75 cents as a mechanical royalty. This is going to get a little mathy, but I promise you it makes sense.
So I just did some math. So at 1 million streams, if 1,500 equals one album at 1 million streams, that would equal only 666 albums, which is not a lot.
So 666 albums, by the way.
That's great number. That's a little creepy.
Right? A little creepy. But that number, by the way, multiply that times 0.65.
All right, hold on. Let me pull it back up here. So let me get my calculator.
666
times
0.65.
433.
So divide that in half.
Divided by 2. 216.
So if you, Nick Scott, and I wrote a song and got 1 million streams based on the 65 cent, essentially 65, 75 cent mechanical license that would have been paid out on a single album,
right?
You would have received $216.
Wow, for 1 million streams.
So imagine if you're one of 4 writers.
Divide that by 4.
Now, then you have to take that original number, divide it by 4. That's what you're getting.
$54. So that's how the gentleman said, I got 1 million streams on a song on Spotify. I got $46. So what is on the future for Sahaj and Ra? Are you guys, I know you're doing the 20th anniversary. And do you see more new Ra music in the future? I hope so.
Yeah, as I said, I'm going to be releasing singles. I'm not going to be focused on albums for a while because I just want to produce a bunch of pop stuff and really go in that direction for other artists. But I also want to create this stuff, and I also want to do some crazy stuff for film and television. I might be doing more for cinematic uses and things like that.
That'd be awesome. But, now, not to put you on the spot, and we can edit this too, but not to put you on the spot. I don't know if you have an acoustic near you, but is there any way I can get like some Fallen Angels or Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic for the fan or something?
Probably not tonight, but we can. It would be too difficult for me to do it right this second, especially with my kids screaming upstairs. But I would. The next time we come on, I'll have something prepared.
Dude, that'd be awesome. Well, man, your time. I can't thank you enough. Can we do another one? Like the next time, I tell you what, when you're getting ready to drop some new music and you want to get it out there, you text me. And we'll do one of these, and we'll even debut it right here and push it out. That would be an honor for me to do, man.
Yeah, for sure. Let's definitely do that. 100%. Thank you, man, for having me. I enjoyed this.
You know, this is one of those situations. I know it might be weird to you. It's weird for me to say it, but you know, I was an 18-year-old kid that put that CD in my car and just found this song, "Do You Call My Name?" that blew me away, and I bought your guys' record, and then I got to meet you, and now I have you on my podcast. So it's a very kind of really cool, surreal moment for me. So I really appreciate it, and it means a lot to me that you took the time to talk to me tonight.
Yeah, dude, you're a homie. It's been a long time, man. It's too bad we didn't get to do this sooner. I enjoyed this a lot. Let's pick another time, make it happen, and I really appreciate it.
Well, and I have some friends of mine. We're trying to put together a road trip right now with our busy schedules to come up to Sweetwater in Fort Wayne. So
let me know.
If we do that, I'm going to hit you up. We're going to get some food. Sahaj, as we leave, tell everyone where they could find you, your music, anything you'd like to promote right now.
Yeah, I mean, the two easiest ones for the producer side, just go to Sahaj Ticotin at sahajticotin.com. And then the rawband.net page is still up. So that's modern and up to date. The tour dates are there. Everything that we're coming up on is there. And then on Facebook and Instagram, I'm Sahaj the producer. And then also the Raw page is still, it's literally just Raw or official Raw if you're looking for the Facebook page. But yeah, it's all in there.
One of the best vocalists of the last 20 years, Sahaj Ticotin, man. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for coming on.
All right, dude. Yeah, talk to you soon, man. Thanks.